I used to believe that loyalty could save a marriage, that if I gave enough, waited long enough, loved hard enough, he'd never leave. But betrayal doesn't always announce itself with slammed doors. Sometimes it whispers through a dinner reservation. This is the story of how I found out the truth and what I did the night everything changed. My name is Rachel Morgan, I'm 43 years old, and I teach marketing strategy at a university in Seattle. My husband, Andrew, and I have been together for nearly 18 years. To the outside world, we were the picture of stability, 2 careers, a modern craftsman home in Queen Anne, weekend hikes, and a shared love of jazz records and fresh ground coffee. But the surface we presented had been worn thin for years. I just didn't want to admit it. That night, Andrew was in the shower. The sound of water hitting tile echoed down the hallway, but it was another sound that pulled me from the couch, a quiet ping from his phone, left charging on the nightstand. I'd never snooped. I prided myself on being someone who respected privacy, someone who trusted. But trust is easiest when you're still convinced it's deserved. And sometimes it only takes one sound to unravel years of illusion. The screen lit up. The message was short. Reservation confirmed. Table for 2 at Colibri, Friday, 7:30 p.m. window seat arranged. She'll love it. Colibri, one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants. We had once joked about going there for our 15th anniversary but skipped it when Andrew said he had to fly to Phoenix for a client emergency. I had never stepped foot in the place. And yet, now he was planning a romantic evening there with someone else. I didn't mean to open his phone. But my fingers moved before I could stop them. The passcode was still our daughter's birth year. The simplicity of it felt cruel now. And what I saw wasn't just one slip. It was a hidden life. Messages. Photos. Conversations stretching back almost a year. The woman's name was Marissa. A brunette with a sharp smile and a soft way of writing. She worked in the PR department of Andrew's tech firm. They spoke constantly, sometimes flirty, sometimes intimate, always familiar. There were selfies from hotel balconies, playful emojis, notes about a weekend in Napa. There was even a folder of saved images. One showed Marissa in a hotel bathrobe holding a glass of wine. Another had Andrew grinning wide, the kind of smile I hadn't seen on his face in years. I felt the air leave the room. The betrayal was a tidal wave, loud and silent all at once. My ears rang. My limbs went numb. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone through the wall. But I didn't. Have you seen my blue tie? Andrew called from the bathroom, casual as ever, like he hadn't just shattered our life. I placed the phone exactly where it had been, hands shaking. Check the top drawer, I replied, my voice low and flat. That night, I lay beside him in bed, staring at the ceiling. His breathing was steady. Mine was not. My body was rigid, a live wire pulled too tight. How many times had I dismissed my own instincts? How many nights did I tell myself that the distance between us was just stress, or deadlines, or age? How often had I ignored the unfamiliar perfume, the urgent texts, the new clothes? I wasn't naive anymore. The next morning, I kissed him goodbye like I always had. Good luck with your board meeting, I said as he walked out the door, briefcase in hand. He smiled, not knowing that I already knew about the dinner he'd planned with another woman. As soon as the door clicked shut, I sat down at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. The city outside was waking up. But inside me, something else stirred. Not grief. Not chaos. Resolve. For nearly 2 decades, I had been the loyal wife, the understanding partner, the one who bent and compromised. But I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to scream and beg. I didn't want pity. If Andrew had planned a perfect night with Marissa, I would give him one. Just not the one he expected. The next morning, I still kissed Andrew goodbye as if nothing had changed. Hope the pitch with the Vancouver investors goes well, I said softly, and he smiled, distracted, already tugging on his coat. He didn't know that I'd read every message between him and Marissa. He didn't know that I had seen the words, "She'll love the view," attached to their reservation at Colibri. As the front door clicked shut behind him, I stood in the hallway for a long moment. Not breathing. Just being. Then I walked straight to my phone and called Faculty Affairs. I requested 3 days of personal leave. The woman on the line asked if everything was all right. I told her yes. Because I wasn't falling apart. I was preparing. I had spent 18 years learning how to be supportive, rational, forgiving. I had smoothed every wrinkle in our relationship with calmness. But now calmness was my armor. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen island, my mind racing even though my body felt strangely still. My marriage was no longer a question of can it be saved? I didn't want to save it. I wanted to end it with precision. Not in a courtroom. Not in an explosion of tears. But in the one place Andrew thought he'd be safe, with his mistress, over candlelight and wine, thinking the world still hadn't caught up to them. I opened his laptop. He never logged out of anything. His calendar was a blueprint of betrayal, appointments, meetings, and one carefully marked dinner, Colibri, Friday, 7:30 p.m. The note read, window soft light. Sauve Blanc already reserved. I copied the reservation details, then searched her full name, Marissa Dunn. Marketing and Public Affairs, his company's press liaison. Her LinkedIn had links to her Twitter, and from there it took less than 5 minutes to find her husband, Daniel Dunn, an urban developer with a firm just 2 blocks from my university. I scrolled through his photos. Daniel had a wide, honest face and the kind of eyes that didn't seem to know deceit. I didn't know him, but I knew the kind of silence he was living in. The one you only hear when you're the last person to realize you've been left behind. But I couldn't just call him. That would be reckless, and I wasn't looking for chaos. I was looking for truth delivered clean. So I did what I knew best. I drafted a formal email, one that felt neutral, objective, and entirely professional. It read, Subject, Guest Lecture Invitation, Urban Sustainability Series. Dear Mr. Dunn, my name is Rachel Morgan and I teach marketing strategy and public planning initiatives at Northwest State University in Seattle. We're currently organizing a speaker series on sustainable cityscapes and came across your firm's work on the Green Line Transit project. If you're open to discussing a potential guest lecture opportunity, I'd love to connect over dinner this Friday at Colibri, 7:30 p.m. It's a beautiful space, quiet enough to talk through ideas. Let me know if this time works for you. I hit send. Exactly 1 hour and 40 minutes later, his reply came through. Thank you, Ms. Morgan. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. Colibri at 7:30 this Friday works perfectly. Looking forward to our conversation. I stared at the words, rereading them as my chest tightened with a strange cocktail of nerves, regret, and ruthless determination. Daniel didn't know it yet. But he was about to see what betrayal looks like when it thinks no one is watching. Not through accusation or rage, but through unfiltered exposure. Andrew had planned a night to remember. And now I would make sure he never forgot it. Would you like me to continue with the restaurant confrontation scene next? He didn't know yet, but he would. Not through shouting, not through dramatic scenes, but through the kind of truth that stings in silence. The final piece was simple but delicate, booking the table. I called Colibri directly. Good evening, a woman answered warmly. Thank you for calling Colibri. Are you looking for a reservation this weekend? Yes. Friday at 7:30 p.m., please. Near the window, if possible, I said, steady and polite. There was a pause, then the faint clack of keyboard keys. We do have one window table remaining, she said. Would you prefer a quieter section? Yes. And if there's one near a reservation under the names Anderson and Dunn, we're colleagues hoping to sit close for a potential project review. A half-truth spun just thin enough to pass. She responded without hesitation. Understood, Ms. Morgan. I'll seat you near them. Would you like us to prepare a wine pairing or a custom menu? No need, I replied, my voice cool. Just the best view you've got. After I hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, the late afternoon light stretching across the hardwood floor. There were no tears. No yelling into empty rooms. Just the stillness before the storm I had quietly arranged. Andrew always believed I'd never confront him. That I'd swallow my doubts and keep smiling through every holiday, every late meeting, every lie disguised in a work call. Friday would show him otherwise. When the evening arrived, I left early. My dress was navy silk with a neckline Andrew once called too bold for dinner. I wore my hair in a low twist, added a subtle line of eyeliner, and stepped into heels that had gathered dust for years. I wasn't dressed to turn heads. I was dressed to face the truth. Colibri glowed with soft, golden lighting and quiet jazz humming in the background. A violinist played somewhere near the back. The hostess greeted me and led me to a corner table just across from the window seat reserved for Andrew and Marissa. It was perfect. I ordered a martini dirty extra cold. My hands weren't shaking, but my chest felt tight with something deeper than nerves. Maybe grief. Or maybe at last liberation. I heard my name before I saw him. Rachel Morgan? I turned. Daniel Dunn stood behind me, taller than I expected, his coat neatly folded over one arm, a thoughtful smile on his face. He looked exactly like his photos online, but his eyes carried something heavier. Exhaustion, perhaps. Or maybe the same suspicion I once wore. I'm so glad you could make it, I said, standing to shake his hand. Thank you for coming on such short notice. The honor's mine. Your email caught me at just the right time. The Green Line project's been under pressure lately, happy to talk through anything you'd like. He took the seat across from me. We exchanged light conversation about city planning, infrastructure budgets, and the push-pull of design versus politics. I responded thoughtfully. I smiled, but my eyes kept drifting to the entrance. At precisely 7:31, they walked in. Andrew, polished in the blazer I bought him last Christmas. Marissa, radiant in a crimson dress, arm looped casually through his like they were entering a gala. They moved as if the world had no edges, laughing, whispering. They were so rehearsed. So unaware. I didn't flinch. I simply adjusted the napkin in my lap. Andrew pulled out her chair like a gentleman, and Marissa giggled behind her menu. Their eyes gleamed in the soft light like two stars burning in secret. But I was already holding the match. Daniel kept speaking, his voice steady, but then he paused, his eyes following my line of sight. His smile faltered. And so it began. They looked like they were in their own world, far removed from reality, nestled in warm candlelight and clinking glasses. I gripped the stem of my martini tighter, locking my gaze on Daniel, who was still talking about zoning approvals and grant structures, blissfully unaware of the storm slowly pulling in around us. He was too kind to realize I hadn't heard a single word. Across the room, I watched Andrew lean closer to Marissa, pouring her a glass of wine with a practiced smile. His fingers grazed her wrist. She laughed softly, tilted her head just so, the sparkle of her earrings catching the flicker of the candle between them. I turned to adjust my napkin. That's when it happened. Our eyes met. Andrew's expression froze mid-laugh. His hand jerked, and the wine nearly spilled before the waiter saved the glass with a quick catch. Marissa followed his gaze and turned, her smile faltering the moment she saw me. I calmly looked back at Daniel. Would you excuse me for just a moment? I said softly. Restroom. He nodded politely. I stood and walked slowly, deliberately, calculating each step like a chess move. I wasn't here to scream or cause a scene. I didn't want pity or theatrics. I wanted the truth served cold exactly the way Andrew had chosen to deliver it to me over the past year. Just outside the restroom corridor, I saw her. Marissa. She'd clearly come to intercept me. Her posture stiffened when she saw me, face draining of color. You're Rachel, aren't you? Her voice cracked like brittle glass. I nodded once. And you're the one slipping your hand under the table onto my husband's lap while your own husband is sitting 10 feet away. My voice was calm. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then finally, please. Not here. Not like this. I tilted my head, amused. Why not? Isn't this the perfect setting? The ambience, the wine, the soft music? You went to a lot of trouble to create a romantic night. Seems a shame to waste it. Rachel, please, she whispered. It's not what it looks like. I raised an eyebrow. Then I suppose Daniel should know what it actually is, shouldn't he? She glanced back toward the dining room, panic flaring in her eyes. Too late. Andrew had appeared behind her. He was pale. Lips tight. Rachel, he said, voice sharp but low. What are you doing? I turned, ignoring him. Daniel, I called across the room. He stood from our table, confusion spreading across his face as he walked over. Everything all right? I looked at him directly. Daniel, this is my husband, Andrew, I said slowly. And I believe you already know. Marissa. Silence. Calibri's warm hum seemed to dissolve into a vacuum. A fork clattered somewhere in the distance, but otherwise, the restaurant stood still, frozen in disbelief. Daniel stared at Marissa. She covered her mouth, tears already pooling. Andrew took a step back. His face was a pale map of unraveling pride. I turned and walked away, not out of pain, but power. I paused before leaving them and added coolly, oh, and dinner's still on Andrew. He's quite generous with his company card. Isn't that right, Marissa? Then I walked back to my table with my head high, my heels clicking against the polished floor like punctuation marks to the truth. When I returned, Daniel was still standing where I'd left him. He looked like someone had just opened a trapdoor beneath his life. Across the room, Andrew had his hand on Marissa's shoulder, but both looked ghostly, as if a dream had shattered mid-frame. I signaled for the waiter. Could we be moved to a private room? I asked gently. And if possible, please combine our table with that of Mr. Andrew Cole. It seems we all have a few things to discuss. The waiter blinked, then gave a small nod. Of course, ma'am. Right away. I'll arrange it right away, ma'am, the waiter said with a measured nod. 5 minutes later, the four of us were guided into a private dining room tucked behind a frosted glass door. The light inside was dim, the table neatly set with crystal glasses and untouched menus. The room was silent except for the faint music bleeding in from the main floor, soft piano, distant laughter. But here it was just heavy breathing and the weight of everything that hadn't yet been said. I sat first, Daniel beside me. Across the table, Andrew and Marissa took their seats like students dragged into the principal's office, stiff, ashamed, and unsure whether to speak or run. No one touched the silverware. No one moved. Finally, Andrew broke the silence. Rachel, God, I don't even know where to begin. Start 3 days ago, I said, my voice steady as I poured water into my glass. When you got that reservation confirmation, the one I saw on your phone, that's when everything unraveled. Both of them stiffened. Marissa dropped her gaze to the table, her hands clenched in her lap. Andrew opened his mouth, but I lifted my hand to stop him. No speeches. I've read it all, every message, every picture, every little inside joke. Napa. Boise. That suite at the Artella Hotel. Don't insult me with pretend confusion. Daniel's jaw tightened beside me. I turned to him. He's my husband. She's your wife. At the very least, we deserve honesty. Not later. Now. Say it. Marissa inhaled shakily. I'm sorry, she whispered, eyes brimming. Daniel didn't flinch. He kept his gaze on her like a man watching a stranger wear his wife's face. What were you going to tell me? He asked, his voice low but sharp. That it was just harmless flirtation? That it didn't mean anything? Because it sure looked meaningful when you kissed him outside the Woodmark conference last month. I saw the timestamp on the photo. Marissa wiped at her cheek. It wasn't supposed to happen. It started as just talking. I felt invisible at home, and Andrew, he listened. He noticed me. Daniel leaned forward, his voice breaking. I noticed you. I redesigned your home office because you said the light gave you headaches. I brought you lunch twice a week when you said you were tired of cafeteria food. Andrew turned to me desperate. Rachel, I know what I've done. I was selfish. I let something go too far and I betrayed the person who stood beside me when I had nothing. But please don't let this be the final chapter. I looked at him, unflinching. And then I smiled. Not the kind of smile that forgives. The kind that says you've already lost me. No, Andrew. The end didn't begin tonight. It started the moment you looked at her the way you used to look at me. When our home became a layover between your double life. He lowered his eyes. Marissa silently wept beside him. I reached into my purse and placed a hotel room key on the table. I'll be staying across the street tonight. I've already checked in. Andrew, go back to the house if you want. I'll return Monday. It would be best if you weren't there by then. His expression collapsed. Rachel, please. I'll do anything to fix this. You can't rebuild a home that's rotting beneath the floorboards, I said, standing. I used to believe forgiveness was strength. But now I know, sometimes forgiveness is just another way of abandoning yourself. I turned to Daniel and offered a quiet, sincere look. I'm sorry you had to learn this tonight. You didn't deserve this. He nodded, eyes wet but unwavering. Neither did you. Daniel nodded quietly, his jaw tight with the effort of keeping it together. Thank you for showing me the truth, he said, voice rough. It hurts like hell, but I needed it. I gave him a small, steady look. I wish you both peace, I said, my eyes flicking to Andrew and Marissa one last time. Not because I forgive you, but because everyone eventually pays for their choices, some just later than others. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of Colibri. The sound of my heels on the stone pavement rang out in the quiet of Seattle's upscale Capitol Hill district, crisp and defiant under the indigo sky. I clutched a small velvet bag in one hand, the one that held the key to room 1607 at the Whitestone Hotel. A corner suite overlooking the Puget Sound, where the skyline shimmered long after the soul had gone still. When the front desk receptionist handed me the key with a polite smile, I nodded and said nothing. I didn't have it in me to pretend anymore. Not even for strangers. Inside the room, I shut the door softly and bolted it behind me. I slipped off the champagne heels I had worn like armor and padded barefoot to the tall window that stretched from floor to ceiling. The city lights flickered below like stars that refused to burn out. The Space Needle stood quiet in the distance, unmoved by human affairs. I could see the reflection of my silhouette against the glass, tall, still, and finally alone. For the first time in years, I wasn't standing next to Andrew. I wasn't cast in his shadow or straining to fix what he had already let rot. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching one of the throw pillows like a lifeline. Then it came, the kind of sobbing that strips you down to your bones. Not dainty, not cinematic. Just raw. I cried for 18 years of loyalty repaid with lies. For the nights I stayed up worrying about him while he tucked someone else into bed. For the text messages I never saw but always suspected. For all the little compromises that cost me pieces of myself. Time blurred. When the knock came, I was still sitting there, face swollen, arms wrapped around my knees. I hesitated, then stood and walked to the door, checking the peephole. Daniel. His hair was tousled from the wind, and his coat was damp at the collar. His face looked as wrecked as mine probably did. But his eyes were steady. I'm sorry to show up like this, he said, voice low. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't speak. I just opened the door wider. We ended up sitting in the armchairs by the window, each of us cradling a glass of water. Outside, cars passed as if the city hadn't shattered for both of us hours ago. Daniel was quiet at first, then sighed. How did you do it? Sit through all of that like you were composed. I let out a dry laugh. I wasn't calm. I was waiting. Because sometimes if you let the wrong person tell your story, they'll distort it. I needed them to hear the truth from the only one who lived it. He nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. Thank you. For not letting me stay in the dark. We talked then, not like old friends but like strangers who'd survived the same crash. He told me how Marissa had once made him feel seen. I told him how Andrew had slipped a ring on my hand during a storm, promising to never let me feel alone. We were both wrong. I think I'm going to file, I said finally, voice hollow. Daniel looked unsurprised. Yeah. I don't think I can share a home with someone who's capable of faking love that well. I nodded, the silence between us soft now, not empty, just honest. I looked Daniel in the eye. I'm not angry at Andrew anymore. Not in the way I used to be. Anger burns hot, but it burns out. What lingers longer is the lesson. I will never again stay in a relationship that strips me of my self-worth, one compromise at a time. Before I tell you what happened next, take a moment to like this video if the story resonates with you, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the turning point that changed everything. What came after would not only shake my world but might just reflect something you've lived through too. Daniel was quiet for a long moment before saying, You're braver than I expected. I shook my head gently. No. I'm just someone who finally stopped lying to herself. That night, Daniel booked a separate room 1 floor below mine at the Whitestone. Before heading down, he turned in the doorway and said, If you ever need someone who understands, I'm here. I nodded. Thank you, Daniel. In one night, you've understood more of me than Andrew did in 18 years. He left, and I stood alone in the quiet. I watched him disappear down the carpeted hallway, and I felt no tears, no surge of strength, just lightness. As though some invisible weight I'd carried for years had finally slipped off my shoulders. Andrew could apologize. He could write letters or leave voicemails filled with regret. But none of that would change what I saw the moment his eyes sparkled for Marissa the way they used to for me. That was the moment I let go. And I didn't need closure or permission to move forward. I already had. The next morning, Seattle was wrapped in a curtain of pale fog, the skyline muted in shades of gray and silver. I checked out of the Whitestone with a calm smile and returned to the house Andrew and I had shared for nearly 2 decades, not to stay, but to begin the process of letting go of everything that tied me to a version of myself I no longer recognized. When I stepped inside, the scent of cinnamon from an old candle still lingered faintly in the hallway. Andrew was already there, sitting on the edge of the couch, looking like a ghost of the man I once married. His shirt was half-tucked, eyes red-rimmed, hair messy like he hadn't slept all night. The second he saw me, he stood up. Rachel, he began, voice shaking. We need to talk. I set my purse on the entryway table and folded my arms. Then talk. I know what I did, he said. I betrayed you and there's no excuse. But I'm begging you, don't let this be the end. We can fix this. I'll do anything, therapy, quitting my job, cutting ties with Marissa. She's already gone. She left town. I raised my hand. I know, I said calmly. One of her co-workers told me this morning. She quit her job and moved back to California. Couldn't handle the fallout. His face twisted. You told people? I nodded. Yes. Your mother. Mark and Jenna. Even those college friends you always brag to about our perfect life. I told them the truth. Not out of spite, but because I won't be complicit in my own erasure. You cheated. You lied. You played the part of the devoted husband while I sat home folding laundry and cooking meals you never showed up to eat. He sank back onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. You've destroyed my reputation. I let out a short, bitter laugh. No, Andrew. You did that. I just stopped covering for you. You hid behind client dinners and fake meetings while kissing another woman's neck in boutique hotel rooms. I was done hiding the truth. He looked up, shattered. What happens now? I straightened my shoulders. Now? I hire a lawyer. I file for divorce. And I start living like I should have years ago without you and without shame. Andrew's eyes widened, panic finally cracking the carefully constructed veneer he'd always worn. You've ruined me, he said, voice shaking. Do you even know what people at the firm will say? My partners, my friends. I let out a bitter laugh, sharp as glass. So it's your reputation you're mourning. Not our marriage. Not me. I stepped forward, voice calm. Let me remind you, Andrew, I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped hiding what you broke. He reached out as if to take my hand, but I pulled away. Rachel, please, he begged. Don't do this. I love you. I always have. I shook my head slowly. Love doesn't hide in lies. It doesn't call someone else baby while telling me I'm overreacting for asking why you're late. I paused. You loved the role you played, not the woman beside you. His knees gave out, and he collapsed onto the rug, head in his hands, shoulders trembling. She meant nothing, he whispered. It was just a mistake. No, Andrew, I said, kneeling just enough to look him in the eye. It was 1,000 choices. Each time you lied, each time you walked out the door with a fabricated meeting, each message you sent, you made the same decision. And now I'm making mine. He stared up at me, voice ragged. If you leave, you'll destroy my life. No, I replied, eyes locked on his. I'll save mine. The next week passed like a foggy blur of desperate gestures and empty words. Bouquets left at my office. Voicemails with tearful confessions. A 4-page email tracing his sudden epiphany, claiming he'd seen the light after that night. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Silence had become my clearest voice. I met with a lawyer. Quietly, efficiently. Papers were filed, signatures requested, and within days the gears began turning. Freedom was now a matter of time. 3 weeks later, a friend from book club texted me. Saw Andrew and Marissa at that little cafe on Fremont. They looked strained. 2 days after that, I received his final message. I thought I could rebuild something with her. But it's empty. She doesn't look at me like you used to. She doesn't laugh the way you did. I don't see you in her eyes, and that's what I miss most. I read it once, then archived it. A few days later, I noticed his social media accounts were gone. Word spread that he had quietly stepped back from the firm, citing personal matters. The man who once curated his image with surgical precision now faced himself, no applause, no distraction. That spring arrived early in Seattle. One Saturday morning, soft sunlight poured into the window of my new apartment, warming the hardwood floors. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, pouring coffee into my favorite mug when my phone buzzed. Daniel. Coffee at Alder and Pine? I looked at the clock. 9:12 a.m. Give me 15 minutes, I replied, smiling. Since that evening at Colibri, Daniel and I, once strangers, had become quiet companions. First check-ins. Then Saturday walks. No labels. No urgency. Just two people learning to breathe again. That morning he was already at our usual spot. Notebook open, 2 lattes waiting. I guessed right, he grinned, pushing one across the table. I'm starting to think you're the only one who remembers what I like, I said, sipping. Andrew never did? 17 years, I said with a half smile. He got it wrong every single time. Daniel chuckled. We both did. Not with bitterness but with relief. It was the laughter of people who had been shattered, and were now starting to heal. Not the aching kind of laughter we used to force when our hearts were breaking, but something easier now, something lighter, genuine. I looked across the table. So how have you really been? Daniel set down his cup, nodding. Finalized everything last Thursday. Marissa signed without a word. Just left a note on the kitchen counter. Sorry for making you lose faith in love. That was it. I studied his face. And did you? Lose faith? He paused, thinking, then met my gaze. No. I lost trust in the performance. But I'm learning how to believe again. Not in declarations or grand moments, just in small, steady actions. The kind that don't vanish when things get hard. His answer didn't need follow-up. It just settled between us, quiet and meaningful. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. We were walking a similar road, one paved with grief, self-discovery, and a quiet rebuilding we never rushed to name. The months that followed passed with a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I returned to the university, resumed teaching business ethics with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I also enrolled in a weekend photography class, something I'd always postponed because Andrew didn't get the point. Daniel kept busy with his design firm, but he made time always. He even began guest lecturing in my classes on sustainable infrastructure and leadership integrity. He never missed a single one. Watching him speak, animated and warm, stirred something deep inside me, not just admiration, but the kind of connection built on shared values. One rainy Thursday afternoon, after a seminar, I invited him over for dinner. My new place was smaller but bright, filled with potted herbs and warm colors. We ate pizza on the tiny balcony, the Seattle skyline hazy but glowing in the distance. "Do you ever think we're changing?" I asked, wrapping a knit throw around my shoulders. Daniel turned to me, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I don't think we're changing. I think we're returning to ourselves." I didn't answer at first, but his words wrapped around my heart in a way I hadn't expected. Returning to ourselves. Not rebuilding something broken, but remembering who we were before the damage. That summer, we kept walking. Not fast. Not toward any set destination. One evening, after an outdoor jazz concert by the river, Daniel stopped. The street lamps glowed behind him, and he looked at me with something calm but serious in his eyes. "Rachel," he said, "I'm not in a hurry. I don't want to push you into anything. But if you ever want to try again, something simple, honest, and real, not another performance, but a partnership built on truth, I'm here." I looked at him and felt no pressure. Just space. Just a choice. "I'm not ready to love the old way," I whispered. "But the way you just described? I think maybe I already started." Daniel didn't say a word. He just reached out and took my hand, no rush in the gesture. Just warmth. Presence. It didn't promise anything extravagant. It didn't need to. It simply said, "I'll walk with you." And as we stood there under the soft hum of streetlights with a breeze curling off the water, I realized something. I wasn't starting over, I was stepping forward. And this time, I wasn't losing myself to stay in love. I was finding someone who had also fallen and chosen to stand again. Nearly a year after that unforgettable night at Colibri, an invitation arrived in my inbox. A retirement celebration for Dr. Helen Marquez, my old doctoral advisor and one of the few mentors who had shaped me. The event was set for the Fairview Hotel in Queen Anne, elegant, understated, just like her. I arrived at the Fairview Hotel just as the sun began to dip behind the sound, casting soft amber light through the tall windows of the ballroom. I wore a navy dress, elegant, simple, the same one my mother once wore to her final faculty dinner. Her pearl earrings hung from my ears, a quiet nod to the woman who taught me grace could be louder than rage. In my hand was a small gift, an antique copy of Leadership and Legacy, the rare edition Dr. Marquez always spoke of during our seminars. I expected a quiet night filled with familiar voices, clinking glasses, and reflections on decades of mentorship. But as I crossed the threshold into the room, my step slowed. Near the wine table stood a man I once vowed to grow old with. Andrew. He was thinner now. His dark hair threaded with gray at the temples. Still in tailored clothes, but somehow they fit him differently, like confidence had been replaced by humility. When his eyes met mine, both of us paused. He approached, glass in hand. "Rachel," he said quietly. His voice was rougher than I remembered. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure I would either," I replied evenly. He offered a faint smile. "Helen always believed in redemption, didn't she?" "She believed in potential," I said. "And she saw the best in people, even when they didn't see it in themselves." Andrew held my gaze for a long moment, then looked down. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not to fix anything, but because I finally understand what I cost you." I said nothing. "I lost more than I expected," he went on. "Not just the firm or friendships. I lost who I thought I was. And when I tried to hold on to Marissa, it fell apart even faster than what I destroyed with you." He looked back at me then, not pleading, not hoping, just searching. And I saw him clearly as if for the first time. Not the man I married, nor the man who betrayed me. Just a person. Flawed, broken, maybe healing. "I hope you find peace," I said softly. He nodded slowly. "And you? Are you okay?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "I'm building something new. On my own terms. And I'm not alone." Just then, Daniel stepped into the ballroom, scanning the crowd until he saw me. He wore a charcoal jacket, open-collared shirt, and a look that warmed me from the inside out. When his eyes found mine, he smiled, the kind that said, "You're safe now." Andrew followed my gaze and gave a quiet nod. "He seems like a good man," he said. "You deserve a new beginning." I placed my hand over my heart, steady and whole. "Thank you. And so do you. When you're ready to start fresh, really start. Make sure it's with honesty, not illusion." Andrew stepped back then, as if granting me the space to walk forward. And I did. That night, Daniel and I sat side by side at our table. We talked with old mentors and former classmates, shared quiet laughter, took a photo with Helen, and danced slowly beneath the soft golden lights of the ballroom. There were no promises made aloud, no dramatic speeches, just a steady hand in mine, and the sense that whatever came next, we were walking toward it, together. As we left the hotel and stepped into the cool night air, I glanced up at the stars stretching over Seattle's skyline. You know, I said, I used to think betrayal was the end. Daniel gave my hand a gentle squeeze. And now I think it was the pause I needed to turn toward something better. And beneath that starlit sky, with a man who had also rebuilt himself from ruin, I took my first steps into that better path. And together we walked on without looking back, leaving behind the ruins of betrayal and stepping into a future shaped by trust, healing, and the quiet strength we had both rediscovered. The past had finally settled, not with bitterness but with understanding. The present stood on a foundation of quiet trust, and the future, whatever shape it might take, was unfolding gently, step by step, with someone who never asked me to shrink to be loved. A year after that night at the Fairview Hotel, I am no longer Rachel Morgan, the woman who once bent herself into silence to keep a marriage intact. I am Rachel, 42, a professor, a survivor, and someone who rebuilt a life with grace where wreckage once stood. I didn't just endure Andrew's betrayal. I transformed through it. I learned that love isn't proven by how much you tolerate. It's shown by how fiercely you protect your peace, your worth, and your voice. And in losing what I thought I couldn't live without, I gained the one thing I had long denied myself: freedom. Freedom to live unfiltered. Freedom to walk beside someone who sees me, not just uses me. Freedom to be whole on my own, even when the world once told me that wholeness required a partner. Daniel and I aren't defined by what we lost. We're defined by what we chose to grow from it. So tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Was walking away from a 17-year marriage too bold? Or was it exactly what dignity demands? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in stories of strength, healing, and rising from betrayal, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your voice matters, and your story might just be the next one that helps someone else walk away stronger.